welcome to Thoughts on Tech powered by Eastern Communications. I'm Danny Laurel and I am thrilled to be your host in this unique podcast series. In this series, we aim to raise awareness on ICT solutions, its many benefits, and uncover success stories of various industry leaders. Today, we will be talking about the creator economy, its challenges, and unique trends. And today we have with us Marla De Castro Rausch, who is the president of the Creative Content Creators Association of the Philippines, or SIKAP, as well as the CEO of Animation Vertigo. Welcome, Marla.
Thank you so much, Danny, for having me here.
So I was reading on your story. It's so unique. You started, as I understand, abroad, where you were working in a completely different field, and then you became a creative yourself, and right now you're using your time to fight for intellectual property rights of creators. Tell us more about this journey and your entire background.
Like you said, I truly did stumble into this industry. I wouldn't say that I was creative per se at the start. My background was in journalism. I actually majored in journalism in UP. Proceeded to take law.
Okay.
And then when I moved to the United States, I actually became a stockbroker and a financial advisor.
Oh, wow.
So you can see, based on that track, I definitely should end up in animation.
And when you say animation, what exactly do you mean?
Motion capture animation is that field where we've seen it in Marvel, for example, or Avatar, where you have these people in their suits with markers all over their bodies.
Right.
And then sometimes they have a green screen, and basically motion capture is taking what is the activities of an actor on real life, and then putting that into a 3D animated screen. So it could be either used for animation or, like Marvel, in CGI, which is, how we get Spider-Man to fly, for example.
And this is what you do.
Yes.
And as I understand, I've been reading up on how this industry has actually grown. We have these people in the Philippines.
That's right.
Doing this motion capture and animation for these big ticket box office hits. Tell us more about that and what's the presence here in the Philippines.
Well, it's one of the things that I'm very, very proud of. When I first started Animation Vertigo here in the Philippines, my goal was, give opportunities to our amazing, talented artists who would want to take part of video games, film, TV, and have their names on there, right? So when I learned about motion capture, and I did become an animator myself, coming here, I knew that we had the talent for it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing because what a lot of people don't know is some of the biggest video games in the world and some of the biggest movies in the world are actually being done here. For some of them, you'd probably be surprised to see a lot of Filipino names in the credits for those. So that's something that we've been very, very proud of in animation.
Why are we so good at it? What makes, we know we're good at singing, and we're talented in dancing, but animation, where does that come from?
It all stems from the desire for us to create a story. That's why we follow anime. That's why we follow certain video games. That's why we follow certain movies and K-pop, K-drama things, Because what we're actually looking at is what is the inner workings of that? For a lot of Filipinos, we are very, very connected with our emotions. We're very, very connected with family. We're very connected with community. All of those things stem from us wanting to share.
We just love to tell stories.
Yeah,
we are
absolutely.
makwento.
Yeah.
But tell us how big of an industry this is. I'm actually also part of this industry in a way, and I am exposed to it, and it's just an amazing industry that I believe doesn't get enough attention, doesn't get enough press. And I was reading up on it and understanding that it's actually 15.4% of the country's employed workforce is in a creative industry, and you don't hear that.
Yeah.
Give us much more insight on how impactful and important this industry is.
I'd like to start first by saying that the creative industries in the Philippines, especially now where there's such a huge focus on it, has been a lot of it has been contributed by the BPOs. So we have So a lot of outsourcing is going to the Philippines for game development, for animation, and things like that. So we have various animation companies that's doing work for Disney, that's doing work for Cartoon Network or for Nickelodeon and stuff. a lot of people might be surprised to know that these are actually not only done here, but the artist has done them. Some of them have actually also traveled to the United States and is working in Disney as story artists or story writers or animators and stuff. But the other side too is in game development. Game development is also a huge thing. My company, for example, has been working on Call of Duty, has been worked on Resident Evil,
Things we hear all the time.
Yes, and it's all done here. So when we talk about the creative industries and the fact that it's outsourcing, what we are missing is one bigger factor, which is original content.
Interesting.
Yes, because in creative industries, when we talk about, like I said earlier, the storytelling, when we do it in outsourcing, we're telling the stories of other people.
Someone else.
Yes. So we're working on billion-dollar IPs, intellectual property. We're working on these projects that other people are actually gaining a lot of money from. And then we miss out on our own creations, on what we can actually do here in the Philippines to be able to sell commercially, not just win awards, because that's what we also do. We win awards, right?
Awards. But how can we harness creativity, an environment where people support our own artists and our own stories?
You hit the nail on the head. We need to support our own IP. A little side story. I was in the Annecy Animation Film Festival last year, and I had met with a few creators from Malaysia who were doing a pitch on their animated project. After that, I actually had a conversation with them where I said, hey, listen, how did you do this? How is it that Malaysia, Vietnam, and all these places, well, how are you doing a lot of this original work? His answer actually struck me because he said very, very straight up, well, Marla, I grew up with Malaysian animation. Didn't you grow up with Philippine animation? And I was like, what is the
Not
Philippine
that much,
Well, I mean, Danny, what's a Philippine animation that you know that you grew up with?
No, I was going to say batibot.
Yeah, right? Everybody says batibot. Everybody says batibot. But really, when we think about batibot, it is an adaptation of Sesame Street, right?
Which is still,
Yeah, exactly. So when people say, well, we grew up with Malaysian animation, how can we say that?
Yeah.
Where is that coming from? So one of our members had said, our hands make other people's work. Yeah. We buy other people's work. We support other people's work. But we never actually created our own work. We have our films, and they're amazing.
Yes, we still have that.
Yes, we have our films. We have
and
started
that's becoming
animation.
more and more global as well.
Yes, exactly. The goal that SIKAP has is really to get it to where we are not only supporting or providing content for Filipinos around the world here in the Philippines. Our goal is we want locally produced content consumed globally.
Right.
Because we deserve to have our voices heard. Our stories are so unique, right?
Has this changed though with social media?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's changing in this world, right? Especially with the advent of social media, with YouTube, with TikTok, all of these things. Creators are able to put their work out there. Mm-hmm. They're able to gather a following before they even get released.
You're right. It's just heartbreaking to see, as you mentioned, that we have so much talent, but we're using it for the benefit of other countries. We're not keeping it, local, or we're not sharing our own stories. But I personally feel that that's changed a little bit with social media. I mean, finally you have, anyone can go viral. Anyone can be a TikToker, and anyone can share whatever personal stories are to them. Has that changed the industry, and is that a positive thing? Tell us more about how that has changed culture.
You're right. Social media has contributed to a lot of things when it comes to creators. I'd like to, at this point, differentiate the creators who do creative content, like influencers and YouTubers, versus the creators that I'm talking about, which has their own IP, which is doing animation, film, comics, and all those. So social media has presented access for a lot of our creators to reach an audience. And that's where it starts. Creators now, because of digital, because of social media, It allows us to cross borders that we
Yeah.
didn't used to be able to do.
How do you define a creator?
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
Because you're saying there's a creator with IP and then kind of becomes a content creator
Yeah.
eventually, right? But are the content creators as well? Or yeah, how would you define a creator? Because it just seems that everyone is a creator now.
Of course, content creators are great creators as well. Even how they tell their stories,
It's
how
some
they
level of creativity.
yes,
Yeah.
and that's creating as well because that's a script that they had to do,
Right.
you know, and they're being followed, and now they're actually being given brands that they can promote and things like that.
Right.
Absolutely, that is creating. What we talk about in SIKAP for creators, though, is ones that can be registered in as
Okay.
a copyright, as a trademark, to be able to do, let's say, for have us to monetize it in such a way that we can license it.
Absolutely.
For example, characters or
Are
stories.
you focusing on the Philippine market, as you mentioned, or is SIKAP also catering to the Disneys and the Marvels?
Well, yeah. When we talk about locally produced content consumed globally,
Yeah.
we talk about Philippine stories, whether or not it's here in the
Okay.
Philippines, or Philippine stories that are from all over the world.
Right.
So members of SIKAP are actually have Philippine heritage that have a story to
Okay.
tell. Whether or not you can tell that it's Philippines, right? Whether or not it has the Barot Saya or what. But it comes from a Filipino heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be able to give access to distribution, to publishing, to game dev, for example, all over the world,
A Filipino game.
right?
Is there?
There is.
Oh, what's
there
it called?
There are. Actually, there are several that's being developed. And mobile gaming is huge in the Philippines.
It is.
Right?
It is. So your objective at SIKAT is to actually harness whatever talent we have here, but also for a Filipino audience and, you know, things created by Filipinos for a global audience as well. Funding must be an issue there, and
Yes.
you know we've already seen that in the film industry. So many talented filmmakers and things just don't see the light of day. What are the bottlenecks to that? Has that changed in any way? And is the government supportive of this industry?
5 years ago, had you asked me the question about funding, I would say that there were various ways to do it because, you know, there's film funders, there are game funders, there are people who are willing, able, because they can see the profitability of films, games, TV shows, for
Right.
example. After the pandemic, a lot of things had changed. Consumer behavior was changed. Even how we consume our content has changed. It used to be that we know how film is done we know how film is profitable because they release it in theaters, and that's why we have the box office hits and weekend opening and
right.
stuff like that. But nowadays, more people actually don't watch the opening.
I
the
know
opening
there are no more
weekend.
cinemas even.
Yeah, so you talk about it and you say, "Oh, did you see the new movie?"
Yeah.
And they would be like, "Ah, yeah, I'm waiting for it on streaming na lang."
Exactly.
Right? And so when you talk about things like that, or even in games where it used to be consoles, where how people really like to play their games.
Now
like,
it's online.
yes, now it's all online, or it's on mobile, or
Okay.
it's on Steam. So a lot of these things have changed the profile of how the consumers behave. Plus, with the advent of all these streaming platforms, the amount of money that you're actually going to be getting for your film or for your animated
not a
series
lot.
is not going to be a lot. So it's changed. So with that distribution and
Right.
publishing change, of course, the funding opportunities change as well because it's no longer as lucrative as it sounds.
Okay.
Nowadays, also with the economy being down,
Yeah.
it's not really something that's
I
prioritized.
feel that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, the government has a lot on its shoulders.
But I mean, to be fair, I want to do give credit to Department of Trade and Industry, for example, the Department of Information, Communication, and Technology. They have partnered with us on a lot of our activities and our
amazing,
advocacies.
yeah.
The big difference, and would love to be able to ask, is if we can get, similar to how Malaysia and South Korea had that big push,
Yeah.
government to actually fund IPs with the goal that it's going to be sent out to be distributed and sold outside of the Philippines. Not only is that going to be beneficial to our GDP, because then it opens up access for us not to just rely on outsourcing,
Absolutely.
but to bring it out to original content. And having commercially viable content out there that is successful. For example, it's hard for Philippine movies to be accepted elsewhere because it's a different culture. I bring up Parasite. I mean, it won an award.
Of course not. Yeah, absolutely.
And can we say that everybody in the world understood that culture? No.
No, not
but
at all.
human emotion is universal. And that is what sells. So there is no reason for us not to be able to reach this.
Yeah.
So if we have the support, if we have the persistence of our creators, we can have our content out
And
there.
I think it's, you could see that already. Netflix, we have, certain Filipino films that have been streaming there. And
Yeah.
So how will you make this industry, how should we make this industry thrive? How should we make jobs in this industry competitive, a real career, something that can be developed and where, people are excited to study for it?
That's a great question, and it's something actually that we've been working on in the last couple of years. The advocacy for SIKAP is really to push the idea of original content as something that is a viable and sustainable business.
Source of income.
Absolutely. Why is it that we can have Hollywood, whose only job is to produce movies and animation and games and all of these things?
How is it?
Why would we consider that such a serious industry? And yet here, we think of it as, no, it's not. It's only important or it's only relevant because of BPOs. Well, we have to change the mindset. The mindset of the way we measure the KPI or the success for our creative is by the number of jobs that you produce.
Yeah.
We should look at it also, not just the jobs, how many companies that does it subcontract to? I'm sure in a lot of film, when you talk about
So many.
yes, the subcontractor for the
Yeah.
lights, the subcontractor
Absolutely,
for editors and stuff like that. When you talk about that, that should be also a measure to do it. Secondly, another measure is how much potential revenue can you bring in by investors, people who are investing in your film, people who are investing in your game. If they shoot it here, if they do the work here, how much more co-production, co-development funding can be brought here?
Exactly.
And if similar to, I believe there's a film going that's being shot right now, right?
Yeah.
Here in the Philippines. If you think about opening it up to production companies that come here to the Philippines to shoot film, to do video games, to do animation, how much more of the ancillary industries would be affected?
A lot.
Hospitality,
Yeah,
restaurants,
exactly, yeah.
all of those actually get to be promoted, get to be sold. Let's look at how the Lord of the Rings, Weta, which is the production company in New Zealand. The big difference that I see is that the Philippines has the potential to create our own ecosystem, a supply chain that's similar to what Weta did, which is bringing in these international co-productions, bringing in the directors, the actors, having it done here in the Philippines, but then add on the secondary thing, which is what Weta did not do.
Okay.
Secondary thing was Weta should have done their own IP. So when we look at that, we see where the gaps are.
Okay.
Taking advantage of doing original content here allows our creators to learn more, innovate
Interesting.
more,
Yeah.
right? How do you teach a well-seasoned animator how to do the next animation, 3D animated film? Have the animated film here. So that
Great
they
idea.
have the tools, now they just know how to use it better. And innovation comes from that, creativity comes from that, development comes from that. And once we have that, then building that thriving ecosystem is really where we are.
Great idea. So invite them, the people with money, to come here, enjoy our beaches, do their films here,
Yes.
and then take from them all the learnings, all the tools, so that we can do it ourselves.
Yeah.
One day, So yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's a great plan. And till then, you'll be fighting for the intellectual property. Make sure that the moment we have our own content,
Yeah.
we don't give it away.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
thank you so much for those insights, Marla. Thank you for joining us here on Thoughts on Tech, powered by Eastern Communications.
Thank you so much, Danny. It was such a pleasure, and I really had a great time.
Once again, that was Marla De Castro Rausch, President of the Creative Content Creators Association of the Philippines and the CEO of Animation Vertigo.